right link.
No, we're all good. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, great. I'm just gonna. What? Yeah, we're gonna record it. Okay, and then we can just clip this part, and after Q&A, we should stop. Okay. Are you in Montreal now?
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, I'm back.
Back from where? From break?
I was for a long time in Ecuador, back home.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
Family, yeah.
Which time do you want to leave? How long do you think your talk is? So that we can help you with time at the end.
I would say about a half hour.
Okay, perfect. So I guess do you prefer questions only at the end, or people can interrupt you throughout to ask some questions as well?
However they prefer. If
Okay,
they
awesome.
have a question, it's perfect.
Okay, sounds good. So if you have a question, yeah, interrupt. We can just keep you some time and leave the last 15 minutes if you go over. I think that's not good.
Perfect.
What do I need to make everyone? Okay. You're able to share slides now if you want. I think we're just testing it out, and then I'll get started in a minute. Okay, perfect. I think she's sharing her slides. Okay. I think we can get started. If you can share your slides so that we can start the official recording, then we can go from there. Oh, we can hear you. Sorry, Maria Laura. I think you're muted.
Yes, I am trying to share them right now. My PowerPoint is a bit
No
slow.
worries. No worries.
There, you must be able to see it now.
Yeah, we see the whole screen.
Yeah. Can you see it as a presentation?
Yes. Okay. Now it's perfect.
Perfect.
So to start this, so let me just introduce you. Welcome everyone to the Urban Data Working Group. We're here today with Maria Laura Guerrero Balarezo. She is an architect by the University of Cuenca, Ecuador. She holds a master's in research by University College London in spatial design, and is now a doctoral candidate at Polytechnique Montreal, studying gender and urban transport in Canada. She's very interested in the analysis of spatial configurations, human behavior in urban space, social impacts of urban policy, and mapping and geospatial data. So we're very pleased to have her here today talking about equity in urban transportation and the gender gap in transportation data. I'll pass it on to you, Maria, and let me know if you have any other thoughts or want to say something else before we get started.
No, that was great. Thank you. And thank you for having me. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you everyone for being here, especially if it's a holiday. Um, I'm really happy to share my research with you. I'm gonna turn off the camera because the connection is a bit unstable, so you won't lose the audio. Um, so welcome to this conversation about gender in transport. Um, what I'm going to show you today are different examples and results around the simplest question. What are the differences in travel patterns or travel behavior between men and women? It is worth mentioning that this field was robustly developed by extremely interesting researchers, mostly women, from the 70s to around the end of the 90s, and then it went relatively dormant. There have always been people looking at it, but it lost a bit of momentum, a bit of mass. So it was worth giving a look at it after so many years to understand where are we today. And there are many excellent researchers doing this right now. Um, it is also worth mentioning that we'll refer to gender for today as the binary man-woman, since we'll deal mainly with large quantitative data sets. Data collection beyond the binary is still not robust enough. Therefore, we will work with what we have for now. For the scope is like putting our gender lenses to look at things that are traditionally researched often, but without those glasses. It is extremely important because gender tends to be absent from planning. Assuming that gender neutral perspective for city planning will provide a good environment, but over and over we see that different groups can't use the space we build and eventually stop participating of urban life. So we'll look at the traditional intersection between transport provision and individual characteristics that together shape travel behavior. The interplay between income, education, for example, what you can afford, where do you live, the land use and transport services broadly, which is that what the city provides for you, meaning do we have bus accesses nearby? Can we shop close to home or not? Are there sidewalks to walk on? Together, they determine whether you can do some things or not, and if you have the possibility, the potential to move sustainably or not. We will look at different angles of transport, like peeking at transport from different windows to understand differences between men and women. One of them is transport poverty. That is another concept at the intersection of transport provision and socioeconomic conditions. The second and third pieces of research are on travel behavior itself, one on mode, distance, and purpose. And the other is about geography, as all of these are situated practices in space. Finally, we will also look at travel dissonance, which results from the combination of individual characteristics, namely attitudes and perceptions, and travel behavior. Methodologically, what we did was relatively simple, is taking robust techniques to analyze travel behavior and separating the data by gender, analyzing it and see what we find, which was like a no-brainer which sounds like a no-brainer when I say it, but is surprisingly rare in both research, but especially in planning. I presented some of these pieces of research at the TRB Transport Research Board conference in Washington a few years ago, and a transport planner from a relatively small city in the US approached me, very nice, very kind, very curious, but saying that they assume a gender neutral perspective to their planning, because why would they favor one of the two genders? So it took a while to explain and to get to the understanding that you are not favoring, but you're leveling the field of something that it's systemically unequal. So the first piece is about transport poverty and gender. And we were wondering if women are more transport poor than men, or if either is more transport poor. So we have on the one hand social disadvantage, and on the other transport disadvantage. From a combination of both stems transport poverty. This concept is super developed by Karen Lucas. If you want to, you can take a look. I will keep it simple today for time constraints. Social disadvantage implies roughly socioeconomic conditions, and transport disadvantage is not being able to access transport resources, whether it is a lack of money, lack of service, lack of capabilities. To operationalize this, we worked with multivariate area indicators with census data. For the social disadvantage component, we used an index that we'll call marginalization that combines the material composition of the household, education level, age of the population, and visible minorities in these small census areas. And for the transport disadvantage component, we used an index of inaccessibility that uses inverted accessibility measures to different destinations by different transport modes. So how the inverted access to work, education, groceries, etc. Both of these indexes were combined with a weight of 50% each to measure transport poverty. These indexes are actually relatively complex, but I'll summarize it for now because the focus is on gender, not on the development of the transport poverty indexes. And then we made a statistical analysis and spatial analysis separated by gender. So for the statistical result, in this graph, we compared the average measure of transport poverty weighted by population per metropolitan area in Canada for men and for women, and found that consistently women are more transport poor than men. In the x-axis, we have the measure of transport poverty, and in the y-axis, the metropolitan areas, and this structure will remain for the next few graphs. When analyzing the components separately with the same technique, we found that women are more marginalized in almost all metropolitan areas, but surprisingly, women have lower inaccessibility, which means that they have more accessibility than men. And both of these were statistically significant. These results can make transport planners wash their hands off thinking about gender because it seems that women's transport poverty doesn't depend on transport, it's not on our court. But we decided to see what happens at small scale anyway. So we made a cluster analysis of small census areas to test areas with a high proportion of women and high marginalization and high inaccessibility. This graph is complex, don't worry, I'll try to explain it simply. This is Montreal. The center is marked with a thick black line. And the pattern that we care about is the red with squared hatch that is around the center, this pattern that I'm marking in blue. This pattern, where there are statistically significantly more women than men, is highly marginalized and highly inaccessible by local standards, meaning that women are more transport poor. And we found the same pattern in the city of Hamilton, a much smaller city. In the Anglophone part of Canada, Montreal is Francophone, which means different traditions, different patterns of development. And Montreal is the big metropolitan city of its area, whereas Hamilton is under the influence of the greater Toronto area, so a different dynamic. And we found the same pattern. And we repeated the analysis in cities like Toronto and Vancouver and found the same pattern, indicating that there are persistent gender differences in transport poverty in pericentral areas in Canadian cities. So for the next piece of research, we were going to work with travel behavior and gender. And we were wondering if women travel longer or shorter distances than men. For this, we used an origin destination survey of around 300,000 trips that has information on the locations of the origin destination pairs, anonymized in a grid of 250 meters. And it has information about travel behavior like trip purpose, time of day, and personal information like gender, income, age, etc. And from this, we were able to derive other variables like whether the family composition, whether there are children at home and how many adults at home, whether they are their parents or not. And then we proceeded with a regression, bootstrapping thousands of samples to make sure the differences are real, because when you have such a big sample, everything is significant, everything you test is significant. So the subsampling allowed us to see what was actually significant. And we calculated confidence intervals to see what was different between men and women. And then we applied local indicators of spatial autocorrelation to the destinations of people to see what are the where men and women are going differently to different places, if they are. So what we obtained was, in the results of the regression, women in the downtown travel more than men, whereas in households with more than one adult, women travel less than men. Women travel more than men for all purposes that are not work, for work. And women of high income also travel more. Interestingly, in monoparental households and in middle income households, there is no difference between men and women. There is something about those two categories that forces more equitable behaviors. Spatially, we found that for working trips, there is a strong, very concentrated, continuous cluster of men traveling towards the center and the downtown, whereas women travel towards the pericenters and the suburban areas, kind of where we saw the transport poverty as well in the previous research. For school, women travel a lot to the area annexed to the center where the universities are, whereas there's a big cluster of men traveling to three spots where there are a lot of trade schools. For accompanying trips, which means taking people in the household, there is a very big continuous strong cluster of men in the downtown and the central areas, whereas there are scattered clusters in the suburban areas where women go to more. And for leisure, there is a cluster of men in the central areas and also in the suburban areas. And when we looked closer at the suburban areas where these clusters of male destinations were, there were a lot of golf courses, and it reflects in a significant manner spatially. The next piece of research is about spatial flows and gender. And we were wondering if women travel between different places than men. We were working with the line that connects origin-destination pairs in a crowfly type. We didn't have the route, of course, and we were trying to organize them in communities, some type of communities of flows that would have some set of similar characteristics. So for this, we used the same origin destination survey. We made a pre-processing cleaning process. And then we applied a community detection method called hierarchical link clustering. It's spatially aware because unlike traditional hierarchical clustering methods, this one takes into account the distance of the flow and also the geography, not only the level of connections. And this gave us communities, a ton of communities, like 200 for women and 200 for men. So this still didn't tell us much about the difference and how they move. So we made a second set of classifications using k-means clustering, using the geometric variables of the flows inside the clusters, meaning the angles and the distances and the shape of the cluster itself. And that gave us 4 movement types that have similar characteristics. And finally, we made a regression model, multinomial logic, with the dependent variable being the movement type to understand what Also, with the first two, we allowed us to understand the differences in mobility patterns. And with the third step, we were able to understand the factors that explain these differences. So, first, in terms of movement types, the first we obtained, we called it movement-based. With low standard deviation means that the variation of the angles is very low. So these are semi-unidirectional flows. High angular kurtosis, which means high level of outliers, and the roundness or elongation of the community is semi-undefined. We obtained a second type called the local-based, with high standard deviation of the angles of the flows inside the community, which means that they are multi-directional flows; they go everywhere. Low angular kurtosis, not as many outliers, and a shape that tends to be round. The roundness was calculated with an equation, so it's not visual. Then we obtained a type that we called mixed round, with low to medium both standard deviation and kurtosis, but the shape is very round, and the mix elongated with also low to medium angular kurtosis, but elongated shape. We plotted the intervals per gender and per movement type, and realized that we are talking about relatively similar types of movements, similar characteristics, despite the classification was done separately between men and women. So they produce the same type of movements in the end. We obtained that the movement types where more trips of women are classified are the local-based and the mixed elongated. And we saw that both of these categories are statistically significantly different between men and women. And in spatial terms, the movement-based for men are basically suburban trips, whereas for women are pericentral, connecting to the downtown. The local-based for men instead are connected to the downtown, much more connected to the downtown, while for women, these types of trips remain in the central area and in the close suburbs. The mixed round types for women are trips that follow the metro line of Montreal. That pattern is basically where public transport is, whereas for men is kind of scattered everywhere. And the mixed elongated type for women is basically on the east section of the city. I know it looks like the north, but here it's called the east. And for men, connect some suburban spaces with the central areas. So despite having produced the same movement types, they are found in different places in the city and connect in different spaces between genders. And the regression, it has its complexities. I'm not going to explain each one of these. The overall pattern gave us that men's trips are more conditioned by geography and travel behavior, whereas women's movement types are more conditioned by socioeconomic conditions. And our fourth piece of research was looking at travel dissonance and how it's mediated by gender. So travel dissonance borrows from cognitive psychology, from behavioral dissonance, but applied to travel behavior, it means that there is a mismatch between the ideal modes and the ones that we actually use. It's a mismatch between attitudes and behaviors. And it's important because it allows us to design strategies to favor a switch for more sustainable modes. For this, we used a segmentation survey with 3,800 observations. That has a component of travel behavior, another component of attitudes and perceptions about travel modes, and a third component of personal characteristics of the people who were surveyed. So we first identified dissonance types by comparing the preferred mode versus the use mode. These are two questions that are part of the survey. And we did a lot of analysis with this, but I'm going to show you a precise one to keep this concise. We made a factor analysis using a section of the survey that were the reasons to use a mode. They were asked to rank the reasons to use a mode, and given I think 24 options for it. Plus another section of the questionnaire, which are the opinions about modes. The people who were surveyed were given a set of adjectives and were asked to associate these adjectives to each transport mode. So they were given all the modes available in the city. We chose the four main ones: car, public transport, biking, walking, bus, metro. So in this graph, in the x-axis, we have the mode that is currently used, and in the y-axis, the preferred mode. So the most dissonant category was from the dissonance from car to public transport with a 10.2%. The largest gender difference was found in the category of public transport to car, which this is the category that we don't want to lose, the amount of women who already travel by public transport, and if they could, they would switch to car. So there were 7% of women and about 4% of men, so it's a 3% point difference. And the total of dissonant users in the sample were 33%. So at least a third of people don't travel as they would want to. In the factor analysis, the factor analysis through naturally, automatically, factors divided by mode. So for the bus factor, both women and men associated with the bus that it's busy, doesn't support their lifestyle, it's slow and restrictive, and men also added uncomfortable. So for both men and women, the bus is an overall negative factor. For the metro, both mentioned eco-friendly and fast, but women also added busy, hard to access, dirty, whereas men added efficient. So in this one, men have an overall positive look on the metro, whereas women have mixed feelings about it. About cycling, both of them said that it was eco-friendly and affordable, but women said that it doesn't support their lifestyle, it's slow and dangerous. And especially, I want to highlight the part of danger, whereas men mentioned that it's quiet and simple as well. So again, men have an overall positive look on cycling, whereas women have mixed feelings or mixed opinions. About walking, both of them mentioned that it's eco-friendly, relaxing, and simple. And women also added affordable and slow. When mentioning the affordability, it also gives us a hint that women may be a bit more captive of walking, whereas men mentioned that it's also pleasant. So again, we have mixed opinions for women and overall positive opinion of men. So the overall picture is that men have a more positive look on sustainable transport modes, whereas women have mixed opinions, and that both men and women think the bus is the worst transport mode in the city. So the key takeaways for Montreal with all this research, as policy recommendations would be for long trips, for example, there is a potential benefit on developing high frequency, including off-peak, rapid bus corridors, for example, along commercial streets outside of the CBD to support low-income women, especially in the East sector. And to support women's local-based movement, work can be done to strengthen the intra-neighborhood connections. Actions to promote modal choice would have to take into account house caring tasks, especially related to children's mobility for women to consider lifestyle suitability. Also, they have to heavily address and promote security, both from crime and from accidents, which is an explicit concern of women. And the model shift away from the vehicle also has to consider comfort when transporting children in strollers and better close-by access. And finally, we need to develop better data collection efforts oriented for gender beyond the binary. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This was a great talk. Should we stop the recording? Questions? Okay, so we'll stop the recording now.